I want to help people gain greater knowledge of the world around them and inspire them to be better Earthlings. And I want to give praise and attention to the people ultimately leaving the world a better place for as many people as possible.
Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to Earthlings 2.0, the show where we imagine how we can be better versions of ourselves and build a collective future that we actually want to live in. Today's show is a special one. It is our 100th episode, and during this time, the Earthlings team has explored some of the biggest challenges and opportunities facing humanity in the 21st century. And it has been an absolute honor to highlight the Earthlings driving that change and innovation. So as you know, we cover pressing global challenges like the climate and plastics crises, along with topics like misinformation, global economics. But we also explore opportunities in AI, the energy transition, automation, robotics, and much more. But today, we are flipping the script. Before we get into it, no, you are not hearing or seeing things. I am not Lisa Ann Pinkerton. I'm your guest host, Luis De Leon. I'm a senior public relations account executive at the award-winning PR firm Technica Communications, which is, of course, under the leadership of your main show host, Lisa Ann Pinkerton. Now, before I joined Technica, I was a broadcast journalist where I contributed to award-winning news reporting at local news stations across the country, including in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Austin, Texas, and Denver, Colorado. Now, don't worry, Lisa Ann is still the main show host. I'll just be filling in from time to time. Now, a quick shout out and big welcome to our old and new listeners. Be sure to follow us on social media, sign up for our newsletter, and if you love what we do, consider becoming a Patreon member to support the show. It's the easiest way to help the show grow. And of course, thank you to Resource Labs for having us on the network. So for today's special 100th episode, we are turning the spotlight inward to pick the brain of the mastermind of this very podcast, Lisa Ann Pinkerton. Now, you might be wondering, where is Lisa Ann? Well, she's right here. Say hi, Lisa Ann.
Hey, everybody.
Oh man, it is so good to have you here. Lisa Ann is not just the host of Earthlings 2.0, she's also the founder and CEO of Technica Communications and the founder of Women in Cleantech and Sustainability. And over the course of her career as a journalist, CEO, and podcaster, she has worked with and interviewed some of the brightest minds out there, asking questions and storytelling those solutions that matter for our future. Lisa Ann, I am so excited to get into it. Welcome to your own show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I want to start with the actual name of the podcast because it did undergo a change. So let's start there. Why the change? It used to just be called the Earthlings Podcast, and now we're here in 2.0.
Part of it was I wanted it to be more of a show and a media platform versus just a podcast because, we have YouTube as well. And around the time we changed the name, we added YouTube, and I felt like podcast was just a little limiting. That's kind of where the idea started. But what I love about the 2.0 aspect of it is it gives it that kind of that technology feel and points to this idea that, yes, we can think of ourselves in a different way. We don't have to automatically go down this road of acting the way Earthlings have acted for millennia just because that's the way we've always done it. There is an opportunity for us to think differently, but it does require a different mindset, a concerted effort to shift one's outlook or thought processes or philosophies to elevate to a 2.0 version of oneself.
Absolutely. And I think what I'm hearing, though, in that answer is, A, you're very articulate in how you answer that question. And I know that it stems from a lot of your experiences, both personally and professionally, leading to the next question, which is how much of starting the Earthlings podcast as a show is rooted in your experience as a journalist. And I think the listeners would be interested in hearing more about your past because we know that you say it every episode. You were an award-winning environmental reporter for NPR and PBS. Tell us about that. Did you miss interviewing people, and is that why you started the podcast?
I did. I really love picking the brain of very intelligent people or just people I think are compelling or interesting. And my mind is constantly wanting to dive in to topics that I don't fully understand. I'm naturally very curious, which I thrived, which helped me thrive as a reporter, and also as a PR professional. Being curious is really important. Somebody makes a statement. Okay, why is that? Help me understand more. And I naturally, as a human, like to dig in as deep as I can so I can get to bedrock of something. And I come from a scientific family. My dad's a scientist. I think I naturally picked up a lot of that stuff from him because, you know, anybody who's grown up with a scientist parent or somebody who's an academic, you got to be careful about those impromptu lectures that you might get when you ask, "Hey, can I just have the answer to this question? I'm going to give you the answer by telling you everything that is required to get to the answer." Now, when I was a kid, I did not like that because I just wanted the answer. But now, as an adult, I really appreciate that my dad took the time to explain things to me so that I could understand why the answer was the way it was, so that you can remember it and you can build from that.
So that's where you get it from. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And being a journalist is not easy. It's often a thankless job, but the reward is the sort of the gathering of knowledge and the opportunity to share it with others in ways that others might understand it. So, synthesizing data and information, translating it in ways that makes it easier for average people to understand and then do something with. I think right now there's a lot of news coverage out there where the reader is left kind of just feeling a bit impotent, like there's nothing to be done. And I like to create news that helps empower people to go use that information in some way in their own sphere of influence.
So, what do you think sparked the start of the show back in 2020? I know that the pandemic was around, and I know that you were telling me before that you really also saw this as a creative outlet for you.
Yeah, well, I always tell people that if podcasts had been around when I was still a reporter, I probably would have just started a podcast and had my creative juices fulfilled. But they didn't exist back then, so I moved into PR. And then I always wanted to start a podcast, but I didn't want to do it by myself. And so during the pandemic, this podcast idea was a COVID baby between me and a dear friend of mine, Christian Roseland. He was co-host with me for the first two seasons, and ultimately he decided that he wanted to go focus more on influencing Rhode Island politics to progress climate action. And that's where he wanted to spend his free time, and that's where he got his creative juices fulfilled. So that's when he moved off the show, and I took over as the host. And that's when we changed the name and started YouTube, and we used that as an opportunity to sort of expand. Since we had started the show, the concepts have been sort of solidified, and then I made some adjustments to make it easier and I think more fulfilling for listeners. And so that's how it all started. But ultimately, it all came back to this idea that my mind is constantly attempting to analyze the world around me and figure out how it works and why it works and how to predict the future related to that. And I wanted an excuse to interview people that I think are doing really cool stuff and learn from them.
Do you feel different doing these types of interviews, even as you go through some of the similar motions of researching someone that you're going to have on the show, reaching out to them, relationship building, that intro call? Is there more of like a creative edge that you're able to retain relative to when you were just like walking into the newsroom with your list of pitches, hoping that one of them gets accepted?
You know what I found interesting is that after doing so many episodes, you start to recognize themes that are apparent in different industries. And you'll notice sometimes when I interview people on this show, I'll say we learned about this from this other interview and it reminds me of something else. And if you put these two things together, you have something new to look at. And that does keep me sharp, and it's helping me stay on top of all the changes that are occurring. I mean, we're in an information age, and I once was told by one of my mentors that it's not about hoarding the information for your own progress. It's about how do you surf the wave of information, because it's constantly changing. You can't possibly stay up on it. So being an expert is being able to surf that wave.
We see the show evolve, but what we haven't seen change is the last line of each episode. And that's where you close out the show with, do you want to do it, Lisa Ann? Or do you want to read
You
your
can do
famous
it. No,
closing
you
line?
should do it. I want to hear you do it.
We will see you on another turn of this beautiful blue-green space flower that we call home. Where does that come from?
That comes from Burning Man, my first visit to Burning Man back in 2000. And I was at the temple. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Burning Man, every year they build a wooden temple, and people bring photos or poems or pieces of art and leave it there, because at the end they burn the temple the day after they burn the man. And so I came across this poem and I took a picture of it because I thought it was cool. And then later on, I framed that picture of the poem and I had it on my desk for a long time. So the poem went like this: to this beautiful blue-green space flower upon which all life is made possible, I'm sorry for how we, your errant children, take you for granted. And that's something that deeply resonated with me then and resonates with me now, and for a variety of reasons, right? I personally believe that we are insanely lucky to be in existence. Full stop. Now, there's people that will say there's, billions of planets within Goldilocks zones, and there's probably very high likelihood of alien life on other planets. Okay, fine. But if you look at just our solar system, we have Jupiter, which kind of sucks up a lot of stuff that might come to Earth. We have the moon, which is probably another planet that collided with us millennia ago. And that the moon, it regulates the tides. Okay. We were provided with water, probably from comets. There were so many opportunities for us to lose our water, our atmosphere, our magnetic core. Life did not have to evolve here, but it did. And we're not going to really find a new home, right? There's no planet B, the way people say it. So this is our home. This is our spaceship. This is all we got. And we don't necessarily, take the best care of it. We take it for granted. We always have. We may not be able to get away from that as Earthlings, but I'd like to see us try.
And I know that you've spoken to a lot of Earthlings that have their missions that they're trying to forward to do just that. Can you think of a handful of some of the either the most interesting or ones that have stuck out to you the most? I know that 100 episodes and really beyond is a lot to choose from because they're all different fields, right? They're all interesting in their own right. Is there any that really stick out to you, like that restore your faith in humanity, if you will?
Yes, I need my faith in humanity restored on a daily basis sometimes. Um, Aaron Theory, the climate scientist turned activist, really opened my eyes to concepts like it's like we have international anarchy. That's what this is his phrase, and listeners may recall that I've used it a few times since because it rings true. We have a bunch of nation states who don't necessarily want to get along and feel competitive. And so that's anarchy. They have to collaborate. They have to sort of create their own systems individually, and that makes it really difficult for a concerted effort to address certain planetary crises like climate change, or plastics crisis, or the rise of AI in a way that might not be very beneficial to humans. Um, so he was a really interesting interview, and the the others that come to my mind are the two-parter we did with Neil Dykman. If listeners haven't taken the time to listen to that show that was back in 2003, highly recommend it. Neil is somebody who does not hold back and will give you the unvarnished truth of what he sees as happening on the planet in terms of climate change, technology, and geopolitics. He is a wealth of information, and he gave it to me straight related to where he sees China going and what we might expect in the future in terms of their abilities to really lead the renewable energy and energy transition writ large around the world. And they're already doing that, and they're just going to take off at some point. So recommend that one. Um, I we the agriculture episodes always intrigue me a lot because there's it's this place where technology is attempting to bring in efficiencies and improvements, but also there are many folks that are recognizing there's an opportunity to go back to some of the old ways of raising animals and livestock. And it brings back again and again this idea that the Industrial Revolution was great for so many things. And now we're sort of starting to figure out that maybe it's not great for everything, and we could go back the way we did things before, which was probably better, especially when it comes to nature. Um, and the concepts of like nature is not, you don't run it like a factory. It's an organic thing, and yes, it's messy and complicated, but when you can flow with it, you can get better outcomes. Force versus flow.
No, absolutely. And with those voices, hearing so many people provide their different solutions, not just that, but they all have their own like backgrounds. They all have their own come up for how it culminated into maybe the startup that they ultimately founded, or the solution they're trying to push forward, right? The central theme for the show we see revolves around climate change, but that can come with a lot of headlines, like we were saying before, that you kind of are just left with a lot of doom and gloom. So then you bring these people on, and they have these outstanding solutions, vetted proof of concept all the way through. But you have to strike the balance still, right? Like there's a fine line between being overly optimistic about things and like maybe like not saying that this is the end all be all solution, right? Like what we always ask the question, what is needed to scale this? Because it can't just be by one particular company or by one startup. How do you strike that balance then in these interviews between raising awareness and like actually keeping things grounded while also providing hope for listeners?
Oh wow, that's a tough question. So when it comes to the tech spotlights, like you said, it's about what's your market traction and what's coming next. What can we expect? Knowing that they're usually past proof of concept, they're in deployment, but they got to scale, and there's a lot that they're going to have to do to survive that. Um, so that's sort of the focus for the tech spotlights. Where are they going, and what traction are they building from, and how do their target audiences how does this really solve a problem for a target audience? Because if you're not, we always at Technica we always say pain plus problem equals profit, right? That's the basis of every piece of messaging that we work on. Because if there's no pain to a problem, nobody's going to pay you to fix it. So we don't want to be problems in search of a solution, right? So that's why we do often spend a lot of time on what is the problem that you're solving here, and let's make sure we get our heads around that so we can understand how this all works together. Um, with the futures, some of those are optimistic, and others are are very realistic in terms of what we might expect. We've got some episodes coming up around, is there a way for us to live in a post-carbon world? And how can we better track and predict extreme weather events? And what's happening when we hear people talking about more tornadoes happening in the southern United States when we traditionally always thought of them as being in what has been called historically Tornado Alley. Um, because I think sometimes it's about really focusing in on, okay, what's the problem, but what are the solutions that we've got right now, or how can we think about this in a different way that can open our minds up? And I feel like if you can cover both of those angles in one interview, it is more well-rounded. And even if you've been given some hard truths about what might be coming, that doesn't mean it has to come. There is always an opportunity for Earthlings to change the timeline. Every decision we make creates a new timeline if you ascribe to string theory and and quantum theory and all of this very technical physics. Um, we could, there could be multiple versions of you out there living different timelines based on whatever decision you've made in your life. So go ahead and make a decision that you think is going to put you on the best timeline. And if it's going to be good for you, I would like to think it'll be good for a lot of other people, um, because I would like to think that the decisions we make in our world are those that give better options for everybody. And so I want to help people gain greater knowledge of the world around them and inspire them to be better earthlings. And I want to give praise and attention to the people that are helping lead us to thinking differently, doing things differently, and ultimately leaving the world a better place for as many people as possible.
Right. And so those solutions and the mission to leave the world a better place extends far outside of climate change. And so it's everything from like housing and stability and things like that, equality, the intersection of race and culture with like politics and everything. That said, how do you see the show growing then? What other topics or ideas are you looking for right now on the show?
Yeah, I definitely want to cover those topics that you have mentioned, and we have been searching for the right voices for that. So if anybody knows of folks who are doing some really interesting work and want to let them know about us, we'd love to hear that. I think there's a lot of technology advancements that we haven't hardly touched on in the show. We've done a lot about climate change, the energy transition. We'll still cover those areas, and we will be looking more into AI, quantum computing, virtual reality, augmented reality, more blockchain stories, and also a bit into some social challenges like misinformation. We're going to be talking to somebody from the Pointer Institute around misinformation and fake news, and how do we get our heads around that? Genetics, custom medicine, specifically for your biology, is really fascinating. Well, we have some shows around that. And I'm also interested in exploring education. I mean, when I was at NPR, I also covered education from time to time. And my mom was an educator. My dad was an educator. I come from a long line of educators. And in my viewpoint, the system we have right now doesn't work for the new economy that we're building with all these new foundational technologies that I just listed out. It was great when we had an agrarian culture and also the industrial age, and we needed to train a lot of factory workers. But that is not the world we live in broadly right now. I would love to hear any leads on people who can talk about that, where that's going. Housing, like you said, very challenging around the world. There's a lot of interesting philosophies and companies that are working on new ways of how we can live. And the ones that interest me the most are the ones that have community at the center of providing housing. Because I really feel like it's a shame that a lot of people live in segmented from each other. Like most people don't know who their neighbors are. So anytime you have housing advancements that are designed around creating community or bringing people back into nature, I think those are really interesting.
I'm excited to see how some of those episodes come together, and especially if we do get those guests that are in those different fields to see what they're bringing to the table to provide that. But that said, if we step outside of reality and go into your dream list, if alive or not, who is your dream interview? Like who would you want to speak to?
Abraham Lincoln. I can't even imagine what he went through. And and how he held it all together, and ultimately it held the country together, right? Um, to me, he seemed like a very complex and interesting person. There's some speculation that he was a homosexual, and I find everything about him insanely fascinating. Humphrey Bogart would be another one because I just have a Hollywood crush on Humphrey Bogart even to this day. And he was an activist when the Red Scare was happening in Hollywood and everybody was getting blacklisted. He was one of those actors that went to Washington to advocate on behalf of actors he felt were being poorly treated and misjudged. Elizabeth I is somebody else that I'd like to interview. Someone else who did things differently and really had to hold her own to maintain the power and create and carry England into a new era.
All great selections. For the sake of having you also here as our subject matter expert on a wide variety of topics that we've spoken on, how big does AI play for the future, for climate solutions, and for the other solutions that you've talked about on this show? Whether these companies know it or not, want to use it or not, how big of a role is it, and do they really need to adapt that much to it?
I would say it is going to be as revolutionary as the steam engine, and people will look back at us and be amazed that we lived through a transition where AI didn't exist and then it did. Like, I think about what it must have been like for my great grandparents to be growing up on a cattle ranch in Oklahoma. And then by the time they were in their 90s, they're sitting in their living room watching television. And they didn't have any of that stuff when they grew up. I feel like the people that are alive today are going to be viewed in that same light uh, by younger folks 100 years from now, and they'll wonder how we ever got along without AI. Like, how did you do it? Oh, I thought for myself. I used a calculator. I knew how to do math. Remember that math? Oh yeah, you don't know what math is because you've never done it. I used a keyboard. What's that? I have to tell you a story about all this. So, I used to teach acting class before I became a reporter. I have a theater degree, um, and so I had these three kids that I was teaching a scene to, and the concept of the scene was if you put three monkeys in a room and you give them typewriters, eventually they'll type out Hamlet. It was a comedy skit. And so these three kids got to play the monkeys who were typing on the typewriters. And I was so excited that I found three antique typewriters at the prop shop at the theater that I was connected to. And I bring them in and I bring
That's tough.
it is. Yeah, one maybe, not three.
Yeah.
So I bring three antique typewriters and I put them in front of these kids. And I'm like, okay, great, let's do the scene. And this kid says, "Where's the screen?"
And I think
Oh
that
my
is so representative of today. I only ask because that's like the name of the game right now. That and data centers. So we'll see how this continues to evolve, and we'll hear from the Earthlings themselves as they come on the show to share more.
Well, Lisa Ann, this has just been such an insightful conversation. Getting to hear your philosophy and also just your really down to earth insights is super, super helpful for our listeners to know like where your head is at, like especially when you like go into these interviews and everything. And yeah, I'm excited to see the show grow and continue to evolve as time goes on. Do you have anything else that you want the listeners to know?
God. Well, we could talk about why you're here.
Yeah, we could.
Earthlings. Luis is going to be a guest host for some of our episodes coming up. So you're going to hear him interviewing really interesting startups for our tech spotlights, and that's going to help me focus on more tech spotlights as well as the features. And so we'll eventually be bringing you even more content because I've effectively, you know, duplicated myself here with Luis, and so we both can interview folks and bring you more of the stories that you enjoy. And Luis has different perspectives than I do, so I'm very interested to hear his takes on things because, as we know, when you have several different voices examining aspects of the world, you get richer insights.
I'm so appreciative of just like the opportunity to do that and exercise my skills as a journalist. I was like you, Lisa, and I like started to kind of like miss being able to sort of like have this creative outlet uh, to do something that I still like love doing. Obviously, I love the functionality of my role at Technica because I'm simply on the other side getting to tell the stories of these very important companies. But now, we have a few exciting episodes coming up. We have everything from wood reclamation leading to carbon capture, leading to green hydrogen. We have transportation that looks to revolutionize everything from getting from the airport to a downtown sector. We have nonprofits that are coming on the show to talk about equity with and access to solar solutions. And I just am so excited to be able to share their voices once again. When I left journalism, I made a list of the top 10 stories that I felt the most fulfilled or the most rewarded at the end of the day. And I let that drive my sort of job search at the time before I arrived at Technica. And oftentimes at the top of that list, it had to do with the intersection of equity, race and culture, and environmental policy. Did a lot of that coverage over in Denver, whether it was talking to academics about water lead testing or talking to neighborhood groups that are opposed to a power plant that may be polluting the air nearby in marginalized communities. And now I'm getting to share those stories here in this medium. So I'm grateful for the chance to do that. And I'm really excited to bring it all to you Earthlings. So yeah.
And we're excited to hear them. I can't wait to hear your first episodes. And they're going to be coming out maybe within the month, I think. Your first couple of interviews are coming up.
So yeah, I'm just so excited to see the show grow, have the episodes go, and I'm excited to be part of this journey with you, Lisa Ann. So I greatly appreciate it. But one more time here, what is the easiest way to find us and to listen to those upcoming episodes, or maybe for folks to share it?
Yeah, thank you. So, shameless plugs. You can email me at lisaann at earthlingspodcast.com and give me all your notes. I don't care how harsh they are. If you don't like my hair, you just let me know. Social media, Earthlings Pod. Find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and also our website, earthlingspodcast.com, and all the podcast feeds, Apple, Spotify, you name it, we're there, and YouTube as well. You can come find us and comment on our stuff. Let us know what you think. What episodes do you want us to cover? Who do you think we should be talking to? Because we only have a viewpoint as far as our little flashlight can shine. And so we need your help to find the other folks that are doing good stuff on the planet.
So we may have different voices on the show, but as we mentioned earlier, one thing stays the same. It's that ending line. Lisa Ann, should we do it together?
Yes, I think we should. That'll be fun.
We'll see you
on another turn of this beautiful blue-green space flower that we call home.